If a guiding principle for the Jedi is non-attachment, a driving principle for the Sith is attachment.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, episode 8. Yeah, finally home, actually. It's crazy that the last 3 out of 4 episodes I had to record while traveling, so it's nice to be back home in the quote-unquote home studio. A little bit more controlled environment, better equipment. So hopefully this thing will turn out a little bit better quality than the past episodes. I do appreciate all your guys' patience with any inconsistencies in the audio quality of the last couple of episodes. But yeah, well, here we are. We're back home again. It was an incredibly busy September, but things are going well for the podcast. We've been able to keep it up. So yeah, here we go. Let's just kick it off again with news and updates.
How you doing, you old pirate? So good to see you.
First piece of news, Facebook now has the capability of playing podcasts. Well, at least on the mobile version. I'm not sure about the web version yet, but on the mobile version, it's definitely available. So now you can listen to Path of the Jedi directly from our Facebook page. If you go to the top of the top of the page where all the tabs are, you'll see podcasts listed there, and then once you click on that, you can see all our episodes are now available through that app. Well, at least when Facebook isn't broken, right? So you can go, well, if you haven't liked our page yet, go to facebook.com/POTJ podcast, and you can listen again directly from the Facebook app. Next update, and this is something I'm incredibly excited about. Also, completely stressing over. We now have a blog. Well, it's not live yet. I started working on this blog a week ago. And I'm building it from the ground up, and really super excited about it. I wanted to give you guys another resource to tap into, where it expands some of the topics that we talk about here on the podcast. It gives you the show notes. You can also find transcripts there as well. Again, to just really flesh out to give you guys more resource, right? To give you guys more resources around Path of the Jedi. Now, I did set a target, a really ambitious target of having that ready by the time this episode releases. I don't know at this point if I'm going to be able to do that. I really probably bit off way more than I could chew, given that I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to building a blog. It's just something completely out of my lane. So if you're listening to this and the blog is not ready yet, I will definitely make announcements on our Twitter and on the Facebook. So just stay tuned. Keep tabs on both of those feeds, whichever one you happen to keep tabs of, and look out for the announcement, because it's just, again, another resource to expand the Path of the Jedi universe. So be on the lookout for that. pathofthejedi.com, our blog, and expanded resources. And now it's time for the shout outs. This week's shout out goes to a group of individuals, actually, called the TBDT crew. That's right, TBDT, hashtag TBDT. I love these guys. I had the fortunate privilege and honor of guiding and coaching them through a program I put together called the Network Marketing Success Operating System. It was a pilot program. They're the first group, really the guinea pigs for the program, and just seeing their progress, seeing what they've been able to do, watching their growth process has been amazing. So I'm super proud of all of them. Especially given that the program was really just a rough draft, right? Like, there's super rough draft, but just watching their growth and seeing how their perspective has changed and expanded through the course of that program. I can't say enough how proud I am of each and every one that went through that program. So again, TBDT crew, thank you so much. Congratulations on completion of the program. You guys are the best. On to bigger and better things. If you want to learn more about the Network Marketing Success Operating Systems program, go ahead and send me an email to info@pathofthejedi.com and let me know that you're interested. I'll tell you more about it. Or you can hit me up on Twitter at POTJ podcast, or even on the Facebook, facebook.com/POTJ podcast. Sorry, I got to remember all my social medias. But the program is going through major revisions right now, and it's going to get some major upgrades. So I don't have a timeline regarding when any of it is going to be ready, when it's going to be launched and released. So just stay tuned for that. I'll make announcements as we get closer and closer to release date for the Network Marketing Success Operating Systems. But as I said, I'm happy to talk about it with you, let you know what the program, or at least the intention and the goal of the program, is all about. So reach out to me, and in the meantime, stay tuned. If there's anybody that you'd like to give a shout out to, we'd love to do that for you here on Path of the Jedi. Hit me up at info@pathofthejedi.com with shout out in the subject heading, and let me know, number one, who you're giving the shout out to, and number two, what your message is. Or if you're brave enough, just record an MP3 and send it to, again, info@pathofthejedi.com. And for our final update today, well, it's not actually an update. I wanted to share this resource with you guys. It's a book called The Dharma of Star Wars by Matthew Bortolin. I read this book a handful of years ago, and I absolutely love it. And I wanted to share it with you guys today because it's very much in alignment. The stuff it talks about, the principles that it talks about, is very much in alignment with what we've been talking about, and especially regarding attachment in the last two episodes here at Path of the Jedi. So let me just read the product description here. The Dharma of Star Wars uses George Lucas's beloved modern saga and the wise words of the Buddha to illuminate each other in a playful and unexpectedly rewarding ways. Matthew Bortolin writes an inspiring and totally new take on this timeless saga, from A New Hope through Revenge of the Sith and the television's Clone Wars. Great fun for any Star Wars fan. So yeah, again, I absolutely love this book. It fills the need for Star Wars, right? And when it comes to personal development, you can never go wrong with Buddhist principles. So again, the book is called The Dharma of Star Wars by Matthew Bortolin. You can find the link to that in the show notes of this episode.
Attachments forbidden. Possession is forbidden.
Attachment in the Star Wars universe, part 2. That is what we are going to attempt to cover today. All right, in full transparency, it's been one of those days for me that I have found it incredibly challenging to focus on anything. So I've actually been sitting in front of my computer screen for hours now, trying to just get this topic started. Add to that the fact that this theme of attachment is so ubiquitous, it's so omnipresent in the Star Wars universe. It felt like a monumental task trying to tackle this for the podcast, because I want to do it justice. Obviously, I want to cover the topic clearly, concisely, and really examine it to its full depth. So if I wanted to get this done, I finally decided to just change the narrative. Change the story I was telling myself about this episode. Number one, I realized that I don't have to get it all into this episode, right? And I could actually revisit this theme and any other theme or topic that I've talked about in the past. There is no right or wrong around this situation, right? Like a year down the road, my perspective might be different. It might be changed. And so, of course, it's natural to want to revisit themes and topics. So I don't have to get it all done, and it's not ever 100% permanent. Number two, I just told myself, take it one small step at a time. Keep things simple. Put one foot in front of the other, and pretty soon, before you know it, you'll be at the finish line. So that's what I'm going to do here with you guys today. Again, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and hopefully it makes sense. But understand, I have been experiencing some challenges in recording this, some mental challenges in recording this today. So in the off chance that it goes completely off the rails, you guys will know why. Okay, so last week we talked about attachment in regards to meanings and definitions, especially in the context of things that we can or cannot control, and attachments when it comes to outcomes, right? Things that we want to achieve, things that we want to create. I wanted to cover that in the last episode because attachment to those things, right? Attachment to meanings and definitions, attachment to control, to outcomes, or to even wanting to control outcomes, attachment to those things, potentially we run the risk of getting more and more anchored into this physical realm. And so in this episode, I want to really connect the dots and draw a line that illustrates why that may not be the most ideal path. So let's use that scene between Padme and Anakin when Anakin was describing the Jedi Order to her. Let's use that as our jumping off point. Now, in that scene, Anakin tells Padme that the Jedi Code forbids attachment and it forbids possession. Now, possession makes complete sense for a Jedi, right? Theirs is a life of service. It's a state of being. So what use do they have for possession, for material things and material gains, and the potential status assigned to those material things, right? So that seems pretty straightforward. However, when we take a closer look at it, there's definitely some contradictions. The Jedi Order, the main HQ, so to speak, the main headquarters, is on Coruscant, and it's this massive temple, the Jedi Temple. Now, you might argue that's okay. I mean, the Jedi need an HQ, right? They need a base of operations. But when you see this temple, and anytime this temple is described, it's pretty massive, number one. It's pretty ornate, right? It's not just there purely for functionality. I mean, it's pretty grandiose. Beyond that, there's also the hierarchy within the order, right? There's definitely a pecking order. There's definitely a bureaucracy, and with bureaucracy comes status, right? So in a sense, there is a level of possession, right? There is a level of having things within the Jedi Order. So, I mean, what is it? Is it forbidden, or is it maybe more of a gray area? Clearly, it's a gray area, right? And another principle for the Jedi Order is that there are no absolutes. In fact, Obi-Wan tells this to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, that only the Sith deal in absolutes, right? So dealing in absolutes could potentially lead you to the dark side. So this rule about possession, gray area, the thing is, if there are rules, then who gets to decide what's gray area and what's not gray area, right? If it's flexible, if it's adaptive, then who gets to make the call? I mean, if a rule can be bent, is it really even a rule? But anyways, more on that later. Back to possession, we can certainly draw a lot of parallels between the Jedi Order and a lot of the established religions we have here in this world, especially the ones where the participants take a vow of poverty. We can see in many of those religions where that's the case, that it really, again, is very much a gray area, and that those rules around poverty and possession really have been bent. Again, if a rule can be bent, is it really even a rule? One might argue that, well, no one Jedi owns a thing or possesses the Jedi Temple. It belongs to the entire order. Well, yeah, I get that. No one priest really necessarily, quote unquote, owns anything or possesses anything, but the Catholic Church sure does own a lot. And you don't even necessarily have to visit the Vatican to see this. So this rule about possession is really a lot more nuanced than it might appear on the surface. Okay, so if the rule on possession is actually a lot more complex than we thought, what about the rule on attachment? Now, within the stories, all conversations and discussions about attachment revolve primarily around relationships and the bonds within those relationships, right? Again, massive inconsistencies with this rule, because you can see just within the Jedi Order itself, they thrive on relationships, right? They thrive on those bonds. There wouldn't be a Jedi Order. It wouldn't be able to operate without those things. I mean, the Padawan-master relationship is essential to how the Jedi Order works. So is it just a matter of semantics? Is it just a matter of bending the rule to suit one's needs? Can a Jedi have love, have relationships? Is attachment forbidden or not? Which is it? To answer this question, let's go to the maker himself, Mr. George Lucas. Now, George Lucas has gone on record and stating that Jedi are actually allowed to love. He says, in fact, and I quote, "They should love everybody. They should love their enemies. They should love the Sith, but they can't form attachments." With this one statement, it becomes pretty clear to me that the Jedi Order's interpretation of this rule on attachment has completely missed the mark. Or if it hasn't missed the mark, at the very least, it's fallen pretty short. And that's the problem I have with the Jedi Code. Now, the code is defined as a set of rules to govern behavior, and that's not really my issue. The code itself isn't my issue. My issue is, number one, the interpretation, right? And then, therefore, the strict adherence to that interpretation, right? The fixed nature of the interpretation, then becoming dogma, then becoming fundamentalism, right? I've talked about that in past episodes. Number two, these shouldn't be looked at as rules in the first place. They should be principle, because principle comes with guidance. Principle comes with wisdom. Rules is just for governance. And without guidance and without wisdom, rules become and feel very arbitrary. And for any sentient and rational being, it's only natural to question anything that's arbitrary. And when you have somebody as emotional as Anakin, he's not only going to question it, but he's going to downright challenge it. And of course, it's these doubts about the Jedi Order, these doubts about the Jedi Code that amplify Anakin's susceptibility to manipulation, or to being manipulated by Palpatine and eventually being lured to the dark side. Okay, so we figured out why the Jedi Order fell apart, right? It was their interpretation and use, or I should say misuse, of these principles as rules, and it was the rigidity in which they adhered to these rules, right? Dare I say, in dealing with absolutes regarding these rules, which is all well and good, but now what? What is the actual wisdom behind a rule that forbids attachment? I think since we've come to the conclusion that the word attachment is not synonymous with love or the bonds created in a relationship, that this particular principle or Jedi Code is alluding to the nature of change, the nature of impermanence. There's nothing inherently wrong or inherently bad with having things or having relationships, having bonds with another human being. The problem arises in coveting these things. To covet these things is to ignore the fact that they will someday be gone. And ignore at your own risk, because doing so only creates more anguish, creates more suffering, creates more fear in your life. And all these things are the path to the dark side. If a guiding principle for the Jedi is non-attachment, a driving principle for the Sith is attachment. This delusion drives an insatiable thirst for more possession, more control, more power, to the point where they are not only willing to modify their own bodies with machinery and computers to extend their lives, but to make the promises that they can actually, with the dark side of the Force, prevent death. But then, what would be the use? To live forever in an endless pursuit of more would eventually lose all meaning, ignoring the inevitability of change. the inevitability of impermanence is delusion. It's delusion that will only create more anguish, create more suffering. The wisdom in the Jedi code forbidding attachment is in letting go and accepting the beauty of impermanence, because it is within that impermanence that we can ultimately find meaning. And I'm just going to wrap it up there. Hopefully this made sense, guys. I mean, what do you think? Did I hit the mark or did I fall short? Let me know. Hit me up. Send me an email to info@pathofthejedi.com with the episode number and title in the subject heading. And yeah, just unload. Let me know what your thoughts are. This is, again, a huge, rich, dense topic. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be revisiting this again in a future episode. You can also send your questions or comments to our Twitter or Facebook page. Again, our Twitter handle is @POTJ podcast, and our Facebook is facebook.com/POTJ podcast. I've had a really great time today exploring this topic with you. I promise next week won't be as heavy, but in the meantime, thank you for sharing your time with me here today on this episode. Until next time, be well, be safe, and as always, may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.